Vegeta has long been an incredibly popular character among anime fans. In one of the dubs, his delivery of the line, "It's over 9,000!" became one of the most popular anime memes in existence, to the point that it has become a cultural touchstone, even to people who have never watched an episode of anime in their lives. But today, I'm less interested in memes and more interested in discussing Vegeta as a character. In the Uncut release of the Dragon Ball Z anime, Vegeta has one of, if not the most interesting character arcs in the series. Vegeta was oddly charismatic, and charismatic villains have always been able to find popularity, and popular villains often get the Redemption Ark treatment when the stories they're in move past them, and Vegeta is no exception. Hi, my name is Zacchaeus, and I've always been a huge fan of Redemption Arcs. I find Vegeta's case to be particularly compelling because it's one of the most complex variations of the trope I've ever seen. And given how complex the general perception of the anime is, that's a pretty stunning thing to realize. Beware of spoilers for the uncut version of Dragon Ball Z, and probably other versions as well, ahead in today's episode of From the Hawk's Eye. Before we can talk about Vegeta's arc, we have to define a redemption arc. The simple definition, according to Google, is a story where the character goes through many obstacles and makes up for something bad they have done. So this is a deceptively simple statement that encompasses, well, a massive variety of journeys in fiction, with a wide variety of motives. Sometimes villains change because they finally realize that what they were doing was wrong, even if their end goal was pure. Sometimes they decide to challenge the bully who has been controlling them the entire time. And other times, a greater evil appears, and they join forces with the good guys to protect their own interests and eventually realize that being good isn't that bad. Sometimes it's none of those. Sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's a combination of a whole bunch of them. So what motivates Vegeta's redemption? We'll get there. The first time we see Vegeta, he's a grown adult who has committed numerous atrocities. The first episode we get, where he's present for more than a couple of minutes at the beginning or end, are when he and his fellow Saiyan, Nappa, spend a day on an alien planet. During the course of the episode, they accidentally kill a ruthless dictator and become heroes to the insectoid race inhabiting the planet. If this were another story, it would be a comedic moment where the villain accidentally does something good, and it would foreshadow his later redemption arc. But this is Dragon Ball Z, and everything here takes a tremendous amount of time. So Vegeta, unhappy at being lionized, destroys the planet before continuing his journey to Earth. The narrative makes it clear, Vegeta is a bad dude. So bad that even when he has a chance to be a hero without making any additional effort, he chooses instead to make the additional effort to cement his status as a cruel killer. From there, it only gets worse. He kills his only ally on Earth once said ally becomes crippled. He eventually loses his fight against the defenders of Earth, but when they show him mercy to try to plant the seed of Vegeta's eventual redemption, Vegeta swears to return to kill them all, seeing their mercy only as weakness. Later, during the Frieza saga, when the heroes use Dragon Balls to bring back all the Namekians that Frieza killed, Vegeta gloats to the revived aliens about how one village didn't return because he killed them, and then he threatens to kill everyone around him again. He's a bad, bad dude, and he does not care who knows it. Well, actually, he does care. He wants everyone to know it. Now, some of you are probably screaming at your screen right now because I did skip some important stuff in that description of his activities, but I did that for a reason. In between massacring the village and his gloating, he does choose to team up with Gohan and Krillin against their common enemies in the Ginyu Squad and Frieza. For any number of other redeemed villains, that might have been the entirety of their redemption arc. The villain and the heroes would have developed respect for each other, and the villain would either die or join their team. But not here. Vegeta is only doing it because he knows he can't defeat his enemies alone, and these are the only potential allies he has. That's not even his only near brush with a simpler redemption arc in this saga. As he lays dying from one of Frieza's attacks, he gives his version of a blessing to Goku, who he calls by his Saiyan name Kakarot, in the fight against Frieza, since Goku will be the last living Saiyan. Goku is even fooled by the story beat as he pauses the fighting to bury Vegeta in a sign of respect. So, yes, Vegeta does begin his redemption journey here, but the later gloating and threatening that I just described shows that this is only the tip of the iceberg that he's going to have to climb. Now, most of the time, when writers know they're going to try to redeem a villain later, they try to make sure that the villain in question doesn't do anything too evil. They might be constantly foiled by the hero and thus will never have actually hurt anyone despite their best efforts, or they might be so focused on hurting the hero that any harm they cause is directly against the hero and therefore can be forgiven by just the hero without needing anyone else's input. Vegeta is an exception in that he kills a lot of people. He has more to be redeemed from than most villains. But he also didn't entirely choose this life for himself. During the Namekian Frieza saga, we're shown some of Vegeta's past. He was a child of a cruel warrior king, and he was raised to believe that it was his duty and right to rain destruction down upon lesser beings, a category that constituted every other being in the galaxy. But that's not all. As if that wasn't enough, his father was murdered by Frieza, and Frieza took him in and trained him and abused him into becoming even more cruel and destructive. Be very clear, I am not saying that without King Vegeta or Frieza's influence that Vegeta would have turned out to be a decent person. But any chance Vegeta might have had to avoid these things was removed by his relationships with his parental figures, for lack of a better phrase. He was trained and required to be a weapon of planetary destruction. Failure meant pain or death. Obviously, he destroyed even when it wasn't entirely necessary, and he often took pleasure in it. But to some degree, Vegeta was forced to live that life. What this means is that while he did more bad things than most redeemed villains, he also did at least some of them under coercion or duress. That matters when you're redeeming a character. Everything that Vegeta does before and during the Frieza saga, at least, comes in part from Frieza's influence on his life. And everything that comes after does come from Vegeta in a position where no one can threaten him like that anymore, but he still has some of those after effects. You don't just instantly recover from abuse like that because the abuser is dead. And that sort of thing matters. How much it matters is up to the individual audience member, I think, but it does matter. So, what does Vegeta do after he's been revived and his arch enemy, his bully, has been killed? Well, he barely misses another redemption moment when he comes up with the idea that will allow everyone else to save Goku. But he only does it because he wants to figure out how Goku became a Super Saiyan. When they discover that Goku isn't actually dead and won't come back to Earth, Vegeta immediately steals a spaceship and starts searching for him. He's desperate for power in a very selfish way, and that sets up probably the best part of Vegeta's redemption arc. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Eventually, Vegeta, unsuccessful in his search, returns to Earth hoping that Goku will come back. And, after a while, Vegeta and Bulma are drawn to each other. Part of it is probably their shared loneliness. They're also probably the two smartest characters in the series, even if they apply their intelligence in different ways. Bulma's mother reinforces whatever attraction Bulma might feel for him by talking about how attractive his dedication to hard work is, and then Vegeta and Bulma pull a McFly, where he becomes injured and she has to nurse him back to health. The end result of this attraction is the birth of a child named Trunks during one of the series' time jumps, and an audience member might wonder if Vegeta is finally going soft. But when it comes time to fight again, he completely ignores the safety of his family in pursuit of his victory. He's still an ass whose only concern is becoming the strongest fighter in the universe. Later, however, he shows that at least some of that disregard may be a deception, perhaps to himself as much as anyone else. When the time-traveling future version of his son, Trunks, takes a mortal wound in the battle with Perfect Cell, Vegeta realizes how stupidly he's behaved and goes berserk in an attempt to get revenge against Cell. However, this also serves as a sign of how his thinking is still screwed up. Vegeta's efforts would have been better served going to his son's side to comfort him or take him to safety and a healer. Instead, he retreats into anger and vengeance. I mentioned earlier that Vegeta is oddly charismatic, so what did I mean by that? Well, for starters, he's not exactly a conventionally attractive dude. He's short and balding, his body language is aggressive, his typical posture is folded arms while scowling down his nose at everyone around him. Screaming insults is pretty much the only way he communicates with others. But despite being ruthless and cunning, he's always extremely forthright. He doesn't ever lie or even try to disguise his intentions. You know that if he says he'll team up with you, that you can trust him not to stab you in the back. There's also something admirable about his determination to be the very best, even though it comes from a place of selfishness. Also, while he is extremely arrogant, it comes from such a place of vulnerability for him, the knowledge that he isn't and will never be as strong as Goku, that it's somehow endearing. He's also somewhat unique among the other DBZ characters because while most of them focus on becoming more and more physically strong, Vegeta relies on his brain as much as his brawn, whereas everyone else chooses to fight head-on and merely match power with power. Vegeta is capable of coming up with strategies and gambits to deploy against his opponents. Ever since Frieza's defeat, Vegeta has been more or less welcome on Earth and has spent a great deal of time with the other Z-Fighters, but they still don't really trust him, and none of them are friendly with him outside of Bulma. He still has neither been redeemed nor truly accepted into their ranks, even as they permit him to be around them. However, when we return from the time jump following the Cell saga, we find Vegeta seems to be trying to build a new life for himself since Goku's apparent death in that battle. He is again living with Bulma. They're apparently married now, according to the wikis, though I don't remember any reference to that in the anime, and he's acting as a father to young Trunks. Admittedly, he mostly sees the role of father as that of a strict trainer, but he's truly strict, not unfair. When Trunks shows off his fighting abilities, Vegeta allows himself to be impressed and gives in to Trunks' request to take him to the park and play. But Vegeta has never truly given up on his selfish and self-destructive desire to be stronger than Goku. When he hears Gohan will be entering the World Martial Arts Tournament, he vows to enter as well. If he can't beat Goku, he'll at least beat the sun. And then, when Goku announces he will also be participating, Vegeta gets even more excited. Unfortunately, Vegeta's desire to be better than Goku has not become less toxic despite all of the time that has passed. Vegeta wants it so badly that Vegeta follows Goku when the latter agrees to abandon the tournament and fight the evil wizard Babidi. Once Vegeta learns that one of Babidi's powers is the ability to make people stronger while brainwashing them into becoming his minions, Vegeta allows himself to be empowered by Babidi in order to gain the power that he hopes will finally allow him to defeat Goku. When Goku still refuses to fight him, Vegeta commits one last horrific act. He unleashes an energy attack on the packed stands at the tournament, killing thousands of people in order to force Goku to fight him. Similarly to how Vegeta's cruelty and disregard for others has reared its head again, he sinks to new depths in his arrogance as well. When he and Goku sense that Babidi has succeeded in reviving Majin Buu, whom they have been warned can and will destroy the Earth, Vegeta agrees to team up one last time. But, in another fit of irrational jealousy, he knocks Goku unconscious so he can try to defeat Buu himself. This, however, sets us up to see Vegeta alone for the first time in a very long time. The audience can finally witness him where he has a moment to be entirely honest with himself. We see that he is torn over what he did to the tournament crowd. As he fights Buu, he eventually allows himself to realize something he's never admitted before. He's not strong enough, and he won't be able to get strong enough to win this fight and live. He could run away and get stronger, and perhaps return to fight Buu then. The old Vegeta might have tried that. But this Vegeta hates himself for what he did at the tournament. and he knows that if he flees, his wife and child will be in danger. With Gohan and Goku both unconscious, Vegeta is the only hope they have. His personality doesn't change. He hugs his son goodbye and tells him to take care of Bulma, but then he ruthlessly knocks him and his friend Goten unconscious to ensure that they can't resist when Vegeta asks Piccolo to carry them to safety. Piccolo can see all of the things that Vegeta is thinking on his face, even though Vegeta's personality won't allow him to express it in a normal way. It's an act of pure love. Remember how I said earlier that Vegeta's single-minded determination to be better than Goku sets up the best part of Vegeta's redemption arc? That entire thing is paid off here, as Vegeta prepares to sacrifice himself in an attempt to take Buu down. He asks Piccolo if when he dies he'll get to keep his body and train in the afterlife the way Goku has been doing. Piccolo tells him no, because only people who have dedicated their entire lives to doing the right thing are good enough to receive that treatment. Then, Vegeta doesn't just act out of shame for the evil he's done. He doesn't just act to protect those he loves. He doesn't just sacrifice his own life. He finally lets go of the toxic thought that he's carried for over a decade that allowed him to do all of those evil things after he'd been released from Frieza's influence. He sacrifices his chance to ever prove that he's stronger than Goku. And in that moment, more than a decade of in-universe time and nearly 200 episodes in the making, Vegeta finally has his character redemption moment in one of the most powerful examples of the redemption equals death trope I've ever seen. But that's not the end. Because, as I've told you many times in previous videos, death permanence is not the be-all end-all of storytelling. If your stakes can go beyond simply who lives and who dies, your story can benefit from resurrected characters. And no TV series spits in the face of death permanence like Dragon Ball Z. Vegeta's sacrifice, it turns out, was sufficient to allow him to keep his form in the afterlife, at least as far as the mahogany desk of King Yema, who judges the dead. And because of the existential threat that Majin Buu poses to humanity and all the other creatures on Earth, and because no one is quite sure where Gohan or Goku are, he's tasked with returning to Earth to fight against Buu again. And so the audience is treated not only to a powerful death scene, but also to some interesting character work after that death. During the course of the fight with Majin Buu, we get to see how the redeemed Vegeta behaves. He's still arrogant to the point that he doesn't want to fuse with Goku in order to win the fight, but he is also humble enough to allow it even after realizing it might mean permanently sacrificing himself as an individual. When the fight moves to the sacred world of the Kais, he's still arrogant enough to try and fight Buu on his own for a bit, but he's also humble enough to quickly realize that that will not work. And in this willingness to admit he's not the strongest, he becomes the one who ultimately saves the Earth and the galaxy and the universe by coming up with the plan to use the Dragon Balls to revive all of humanity so that Goku can create a spirit bomb to defeat Buu. His arrogance at that point prevents him from getting through to humanity enough to convince them to give their energy to Goku. But his humility sees him fight Majin Buu in a holding action to give Goku and Hercule Satan a chance to figure out how to enact the plan and vanquish their greatest foe. And even better, we see that Vegeta's arc still isn't entirely complete. He begs Goku to throw the spirit bomb and kill him along with Buu. It's clear that despite all evidence to the contrary, Vegeta still doesn't feel worthy to continue living with all of his friends and family. Vegeta is by far the most interesting character in Dragon Ball Z, and possibly one of the most interesting characters in all of fiction. A show that is infamous for the amount of time it takes for things to happen uses, in this case, that massive amount of time to great effect in depicting one of the most fascinating villain redemption arcs I've ever seen. Because everything takes so long, the changes that Vegeta experiences are allowed to be very subtle, slow in coming, and they reflect how things work in real life that way. And even though he is a drastically different person at the end of the series as compared to who he was at the beginning, many of the core parts of his personality remain intact. One of the weak points of many villain redemption arcs is that they'll not just change signs, but also personalities. Vegeta never stops being a jerk to everyone around him, and while you probably don't want to be his friend even at the end, it's refreshing to see writing that allows someone to continue being who they are, even as they choose new goals for themselves, just like we do in real life. I said at the beginning that redemption arcs have a huge variety of paths available to them. I think that might be one of the reasons I find them so interesting. It's natural for writers to focus on the hero's journey in their stories, to the point that the high points of those have largely been done a million times before. There isn't anything wrong with that, especially because variation can be added in between the high points to create stories that are unique and worth telling. But because writers often aren't nearly so focused on the villains, those that choose to put some real effort into those arcs can more easily do things we've never seen before or that feel very different. And when it comes to Vegeta, we see that play out. Whatever else you might think or say about Dragon Ball Z, I hope you'll always remember that it took an incredibly abrasive and direct character and gave him one of the most complex and subtle character arcs ever written. Thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time, I hope you have a beautiful day, and may all of your paths be paved with hexagonal stones.